Hey, this is Swoopy, and you're listening to Whimsicality, walking and chewing gum at the same time for about 10 minutes a week. Saturday, July 16th. Midnight. I shall admit to you without shame that I was participating in a ritual, one that could only be performed on that date certain and at that particular witching hour. I was not alone in this, and all the participants were willing. Their ages ranged from nearly infantile to bespectacled, quiet grandmotherly types. It was, in fact, a worldwide collusion. En masse, we rose a triumphant howl and made an offering of cash or credit, no checks please, in return for that which we were seeking, having waited and planned for several years for the culmination of our efforts. And when the stroke of midnight tolled, we were imbued with our glorious reward. We beheld it, we cherished it, and then we emerged from the haze that our effulgence had created and rushed home with our quarry, still dazzled by its brilliance. It was a fait accompli. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince was mine. I alone possessed the power. Well, okay, me and 10 million other people. Yeah, I was up at midnight to get a book, a whole 8 hours earlier than I would have otherwise. I didn't even crack it open that night, but in case I wanted to, I had it. If I were a self-respecting geek and of my generation, I would have toted it down to my local pub and plunked it proudly on the bar, done a few shots, perhaps treating the crowd of tardy coiffed 20-somethings, much more hip than me, to a spontaneous performance, complete with bad British accents in a variety of voices, a full cast portrayal to rival anything that was on ESPN at the time on the big screen. I mean, come on. The NBA playoffs are over, the All-Star break has passed us. Stop shaking your booties to pond a replay and stick your nose in a book. It's all the rage. Everybody's doing it. Right now, at midnight, in July. In 2005? Am I not surrounded by digital toys, an absurd amount of satellite television channels, the choice of 40 movies playing just down the street? I can go to an all-night gym, an all-night diner, because of or in spite of the all-night gym and the all-night diner. I can check out my own groceries. I can listen to Playboy Radio, I can teleconference with people all over the world, but I'm in a frenzy along with tens of millions of people all at the same time over a book. To be fair, available in audiobook, likely also podiobook and digital format. But I can download anything at midnight any day of the week. I wanted to go rub elbows in a bookstore at midnight to get caught up in a book frenzy for the genuine paper-bound article, especially because it's 2005. In the days of the hand-copied book, before the printing press, and long before desktop publishing as we know it, books were expensive and rare. So prized were these tomes that they were chained to desks and shelves to prevent theft. I wonder if that worked for the monks and scholars that painstakingly copied these pages, one character at a time. Many a dangling chain in a phone booth makes me suspect otherwise. Phone books are free, people. You don't gotta take them. Although, truthfully, I can't remember the last time I needed a phone book. Or a phone booth, for that matter. Not for making a phone call, anyway. Beginning in the 7th century, these hand-copied texts were largely religious manuscripts, and the copying of them was an act of worship. Much as the tedious and repetitive copying of a misspelled word will emblazon it upon your brain, the writing of the Word of God commits it to memory. The act of setting forth the Holy Scripture was to make it known to the world, and its very creation was meant to pay tribute to God. These manuscripts were often illuminated with elaborate illustrations of exceptional intricacy and beauty. One of the most noted examples of the illuminated manuscript is the Irish Book of Kells, which is also known as the Book of Columba, after the name of the saint that the monastery of Iona honored, where the book was fabled to have been created. It contained the Latin text of the Gospels Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and the Gospel of John through John 17:13. The Book of Kells was an unfinished work. There was no sequel. It probably would have been a bestseller, but books didn't work that way in the 7th century. So beautiful is the illumination of the Book of Kells, it is considered by many scholars to be one of the most important works of medieval art ever studied. In fact, it is more art than manuscript, as the decoration of many of the pages makes the text practically illegible. The decoration of the book is not limited to the major pages. Indeed, all but 2 pages have at least some decoration. Scattered through the text are decorated initials and small figures of animals and humans, often twisted and tied into complicated knots. The production of a single copy of the 4 Gospels, such as the Book of Kells, required that the monks keep as many as 1,200 cattle. The cows were food and milk, but also for parchment, since paper was not in use at that time. Cows or trees is a renewable resource. Trees smell better, and parchment jams up my inkjet. I think I'll stick with paper. Over in China, printing was already a reality. No cows needed. A technique known as block printing dates from the 6th century in China. The oldest surviving book using block printing is the Diamond Sutra of AD 868. More exactly, the Vajrak Chadika Praj Na Paramitra Sutra means the perfection of wisdom, sutra that cuts like a thunderbolt. This sutra teaches the practice of the avoidance of abiding in extremes of mental attachment. Often memorized and chanted in Buddhist monasteries, this book is still extremely popular in Buddhist tradition. A bestseller, it has held its pertinence for thousands of years. Stick that in your Harry Potter and chew on it a while. Although Johann Gutenberg is often hailed as the father of movable type around 1440, a movable type metal printing press was invented in Korea between 1234 and 1241, and by the 12th century, many Arabic and Chinese libraries contained tens of thousands of printed books. Venice had its first press in 1469, but by 1500, the city had 417 printers. Technology, even then, expanded quickly. This allowed books, once used nearly solely for religious teachings and meant for the wealthy and educated, to begin to be more available to the masses. The cart doesn't do much when put before the horse, and such is true of a printing press before the advent of paper. The word paper is a derivative of papyrus, which the ancient Egyptians used as early as 3000 BC. The Greeks, of course, picked this up as well as the Romans. Back then, though, if you weren't living in the tropics and didn't have any papyrus plants, you used sheep or cow skin, which became vellum. In China, they used bamboo, which was heavy and awkward to transport. Silk was, of course, used as well, but it was very costly. The Chinese got the hang of paper in AD 105, using cotton rags. Eventually, through trade, travel, and war, paper made its way to the Middle East, adopted by the Indian, and then subsequently by the Italians, using hemp and linen in lieu of cotton. Even so, a steam-driven paper-making machine wasn't invented until the 19th century, many years after movable type. The Fourdrinier machine was invented by the Frenchman Nicolas Louis Robert in 1798 and developed in England by Brian Duncan for Henry and Celie Fourdrinier. With the gradual introduction of cheap paper, schoolbooks, fiction, and nonfiction, and newspapers became slowly available to nearly all the members of an industrial society and can be considered a part of the Industrial Revolution. So you got the paper, you got the press, you got the books. Lots of them. Archaeologists have found evidences of libraries dating from ancient civilizations utilizing clay tablets to papyrus to scrolls of silk, and in the 9th century, completely public libraries began to appear in many Islamic cities. In the West, public libraries were established under the Roman Empire, and the lecterns and shelves of medieval libraries arose from the need to chain the valuable books to keep them from being stolen, because again, they were too expensive for people to own. Of the modern era, one of the most notable personages in the advancement of making books available to everyone was businessman and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie, known as the patron saint of libraries. Of the more than 2,500 libraries funded between 1883 and 1929, 1,689 were built in the United States, 660 in Britain and Ireland, 156 in Canada, and others in New Zealand, the Caribbean, the West Indies, and Fiji. When the last grant was made in 1919, there were 3,500 libraries in the United States, nearly half of them paid for by Carnegie. Carnegie-funded libraries were distinguished by a lamppost or lantern outside of every branch, symbolizing enlightenment. More than half of Carnegie's libraries are still in use, including 31 of the New York Public Library's 39 buildings. The Library of Congress is the largest library in the world, with more than 120 million items on approximately 530 miles of bookshelves. However, the library does not contain a copy of every book printed. That would be nearly impossible. The collections do include more than 18 million books, 2.5 million recordings, 12 million photographs, 4.5 million maps, and 54 million manuscripts. And the library continues to grow at the current rate of 10,000 items daily. But that is less than half of the actual number of items they receive. Items that are not selected for the Library of Congress's own collections are used in national and international exchange programs made available to other federal agencies or donated to educational institutions and nonprofit organizations in the United States. The library boasts one of the largest rare book collections in the world, including a perfect vellum copy of the Gutenberg Bible, as well as the largest collection of comic books, 100,000 issues. I more or less grew up in a library that was barely a block from my house. An early reader, I read everything I could get my hands on. I remember vividly the day that I was upgraded from the blue card that allowed me to check out only books from the children's side of the library and got a much more adult-looking beige-colored card. They had these metal squares on them back then and were made of cardboard. No magnetic strips for us. I found books in the card catalog. For you young people, it was a system of cards with numbers on them that allowed you to find stuff on the shelves, but you had to look it up, and you had to write it down or take the whole drawer with you, and that was kind of frowned on. But you couldn't take the cards out. There wasn't a printer, but we did have record players. Anyway, it was my favorite place growing up. Thank you, Walla Walla Public Library. The power of a book is that it isn't only a physical object which can be beautiful to behold and have huge sentimental attachment, but that it is a carrier for thoughts and any number of feelings and ideas that are then imparted to the reader, whomever he or she might be. The subject matter of any given book can be as varied as the person who chooses it. There is no limitation to the power of the written word any more than there is limitation to what you might choose to read at any given time. Your own personal interpretation of what lies within the pages of any book makes each thing you read an intimate and singular experience. And in 2005, a book can be a shared experience that brings together people of all ages and classes. At midnight, just to have fun. And that's pretty powerful too. This is Swoopy. Please be advised that not a single sheet of paper was used in the creation of this podcast.
Join our discussion forums at www.skepticality.com. Leave feedback by email at feedback@skepticality.com or by phone at area code 206-888-HOAX. That's 206-888-4629. This has been Skepticality. Thanks for listening.